All right, hello and welcome. Brett here with clickmill.co. In this video, we are going to be going over with Michael and Pastor Karen how we take keywords and then use them on a website. And so we're going to look at that. So Pastor Karen, let me pull up, there we go, SEMrush, and I am going to share my screen. Now, this is where we get into some pretty good strategy for using keywords, Pastor Karen. So for example, let's look up church near me. And let's say, we're trying to reach people who are looking for our ministry and we want to get to them where they're at, right? Jesus, we know he knows who his audience is. Well, it's maybe people new to town, people looking for a new church. Okay, where are they? They're on Google. What are they looking for? Church near me. We know who our audience is and we go to them. So what do we do to go to them? We create a page that in some way shows up on the Google search engine. So for example, I'm, here in Oahu, and if I type in church near me, these churches know who I am and they're coming to me. I am on the Google search engine and they're meeting me here, just like Jesus went to the boats and met the disciples. Same thing. They're coming to Google, they're meeting me here. And then they're offering to meet a deeply felt need. Baptist church. Oh, you have a church. I need a church. Okay, so they're offering to meet a need. Now, I know this is very self-explanatory. Obviously, they have a church, but that's what I'm looking for. So this is the Google Map Pack. So they're coming to me on Google Maps and they're saying, look, I'm going to meet your need for a close location. Oh, look, we're however far away we are. And so this is one way that they're trying to meet a need, by closeness to my location. This is another way they're trying to meet a need. 10 churches near Kaneohe, which is where I am. So near me. Okay, so 10 of them. Look, you get a whole bunch of options. Well, that's kind of the same thing that's happening here. They're also trying to meet a need by telling me, look, this many people here like this church. This has got 48 5 stars. This has got 26 4.5 stars. Oh, okay. So the quality of the church and the location, you can see how they're trying to meet my need on sort of multiple levels here. So this is following our biblical format for growing our following. Now, when we do a keyword, there are different intents. And remind me, Pastor Green, did we get into the intent column last week? A little bit? Okay. So we're going to build on that. So there's informational intent, which is people who aren't ready to really do anything, but they're just looking for information. Then there is a transactional intent. And that is people who are looking to convert on a website. So for example, here, and this is also nationwide, so there's 300,000 church near me's nationwide. If you zoom into any specific locality, it's obviously going to be a lot less than that, maybe 300 or 500 people a month looking for a new church, depending on the size of the town. So you have to factor that in. But these people are looking to do something. Well, what are they looking to do? Convert, save my seat, plan my trip, plan my visit. And so if your ministry doesn't have a call to action for them to do what they're looking to do, you're not going to be growing your audience. You need to provide the next step. So Jesus meets a deeply felt need. Hey, we have a super well-liked church. Look, we've got 5-star ratings. We're near your location. And then what? Follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. Well, that's the follow me. That's the call to action on the website. If we don't have it, they can't sign up. That's the transactional intent. Now, there's also a commercial intent. So for example, we'll look up something similar. We'll just go Christian, Christian counseling. So the Christian, there we go. Spelled it right. We're waiting. Okay. So here you'll see commercial intent. Christian counseling near me. Okay, so this person, and this is interesting. I'm not sure how it exactly delineates between the transactional here. Christian counseling, they say, is commercial, consumer. People are ready to buy here. That's what this one means. I don't really know because this seems very similar. So maybe, maybe not. I don't always depend on what this tool says these are, again, because this is just probably an AI putting these in here. I'm still smarter than an AI, probably for 5 more minutes, and then they'll be smarter than me. But either way, I'm going to critical think it. If someone's looking for Christian counseling near me, for sure, they're probably looking to say, get my free call, you know, my complimentary call, get a brochure. Probably definitely looking for that, but there's probably a good shot that they're also looking to sign up for services. So they're close to the service, but maybe not quite. Also, how else could we kind of see where they're at? Well, Christian counseling near me, $4, $6. There's a reason this one costs more, and it's because they're making more money on it. So they're willing to bid up the price of those clicks. So that tells us something. Now, another reason this could be lower is because near me is local. So there's less searches in any in any individual location, and there's more searches. This is for the whole country. If I go search Christian counseling, this is what in the United States you're certified for a state. So this would be competition not on a local level, but on a state level. And that makes more sense too. So if I'm considering this is geographically a larger area and it's $6.31 to bid and get clicks for a whole state, or $4 for local near me searches, I'm going to probably say Christian counseling near me is probably commercial. $4 for a local click, probably someone's buying. Okay. And why do I say that? Because if I have to buy 100 clicks, that's $400. So I'm paying $400 to get 100 people to my landing page. But what happens after that? Let's say I get 2 clients out of every 100 clicks, or 1 client. Let's say I get 3 calls booked, 3 complimentary calls, and they call and I talk to them for 15 minutes and one of those sign up. How much money am I making on that client? Well, let's say $100 an hour. How many visits are they going to come for? I don't know. Let's say 6 visits for their Christian counseling. I don't know. Let's just call 6 visits average. Well, that's $600, and they spent $400 to get the client. So we're profiting a 30% margin. And so, that is $4 a click. Seems like that would be about as high as you could go if you're offering. And again, those numbers are made up. If I was working with an actual therapist, I would actually ask them, how many visits do they make? How much do they pay per visit? How much is the average value of a client when they come in over the duration of their stay? And then what can we pay per click? $4 is now about average across all industries in the United States in 2023. So that tells me it's competitive, and that tells me people aren't just doing a transaction. They're doing a conversion on a website, and then after that, they're signing up for services. Online, probably what's happening, because local agencies are probably doing callbacks online with like BetterHelp or whatever it is, they're signing up and paying on the website. And so that is probably why this is commercial, because the websites are really sophisticated and they can take all of the money on the site. So either way, I know we're getting into the weeds there. This is probably commercial based on the cost per click and the way in which their lead system is set up. They're probably doing callbacks and then scheduling through a different system. They're probably taking the money. Bigger area, higher cost, smaller area, a little bit of a lower cost, but still that's a lot of money to pay for 1 click. So seems like commercial. Either way, this is kind of what we can look at as we're assessing for our ministry. And now, so transactional is wanting to sign up. I don't think this is transactional. I think that's commercial, but at least a transaction. So we need to have that free sign up, the commitment on our site somehow. Then commercial searches are the meme of that Simpsons character. I don't really watch The Simpsons, but whatever that guy is, and he's holding the money and he's like, shut up and take my money. That's what commercial is. And that means when those people show up, it needs to say, pay now, buy now, get it today, get free shipping, get 10% off, because they're purchasing. And that's not always as relevant to churches unless you have sort of like a some kind of an online shopping thing with your church or something. If you're selling products, that might be relevant, but usually with churches, you're going to see transactional. So we need to make sure they have the step in our buyer journey that says, save my seat, and then we can move into that. Okay, so what I want to talk about in this call, since now we've got the overview of that set, is how do we set up our digital strategy based on intent? And this is super important. This is kind of the core of digital strategy. Once you know what the intent of a keyword is and how keywords work, then we build our strategy on top of that. So for example, if we have the intent for, let's look at this. What is a church? We're going to look that up. This is clearly an informational intent keyword. Is this person ready to go to church? No. Are they going to be looking for a sign up and come to church? No, they don't know what a church is. So first, we have to say, what is a church? And so notice, what is a non-denominational church? What is a Lutheran church? What is a Methodist church? What is a church? 1,000 searches a month for what is a church. What is a cowboy church? That's a great question. I don't know. But so what is a church? Okay, so if I'm trying to get people in my area or online, let's say I have a digital service, and I'm trying to get people who want to engage with church, but they're not ready and they're looking for information, this has to go to a piece of content, and we're looking at a keyword tool for Google. So in this case, we know what is a non-denominational church, 2,900 searches a month. At 34 difficulty, I would look at my website. I'd say, is my domain authority high enough, my authoritativeness high enough that I can rank for a 34 difficulty keyword? And also, do I have other keywords that are ranking page 1, say, on Google for 34 difficulty? And if so, all right, we'll go after that. If not, I'm going to look for something easier. What is a cowboy church? This might be great if I'm in Texas. I don't know. But if this is good for Texas and people are looking for a cowboy church where they can wear their cowboy hat and, do whatever cowboys do, after church, we go lasso the cows or something, then this might be a great thing to have a blog on. Oh, a cowboy church is a group of Christians who come and they do church and they worship and they do the normal church service. And then afterwards they go lasso cattle and have a rodeo or something. And so we have an article on that. And that is the information. So informational content, and this is the first part of the strategy. Informational searches go to an informational page, which is usually a blog explaining something. Okay. So and I'm going to draw on the page here so you can see this. And I'm sure you've seen my drawings and they're beautiful. So prepare yourself for that. Okay. Oh, and I need to switch from white to black. Okay. We're going to go here, erase that and come back here. Okay. So this is the flow of, what do you want to say? Okay. So this is the flow of a marketing funnel, more or less. You have the informational searches because anyone who's looking to commit is looking for information. This is the relationship process when it's regarding to the intent of a search. Okay. At the beginning of a relationship, we're just looking for information. What is this about? So my wife is talking to me before we even know each other. And it's like, well, who are you? Oh, well, what do you believe? Where are you going? What are you all about? And we have to have this information sharing phase. Then there is a transactional phase and I just had a weird thing there. Okay. At some point, the information moves to a transaction. Now, this informational phase can be very small if the transaction is very small. So it's like, well, hey, I'm Brett. It's like our friend groups are together. And it's like, hey, I enjoyed getting to know you a little bit. I'd love to get to know you more. Can I get your phone number? That is a small transaction and it required a small amount of information. Okay. So then that's the conversion, is the transaction. And then at some point, there is a purchase, and that is the commercial. That's the actual commitment. And you can see how that maps over onto the relationship. At some point after the transaction, phone number, we're talking, maybe we go out and get more information on dates or whatever. And then at some point after this relationship building process, we get the commercial, which is the big commitment where you're putting your money on the table. It's like, well, let's get married. And so that's the relationship building there. So what do you do in marketing? You get the information. The consumer needs to look. I'm going to spend $200 on my favorite pair of Nike shoes, which I would never do, but some people love that. And what do I need to do? I need to read 30 articles about the, which type of Nike shoes retain their value the longest and are the coolest and all this stuff. Okay. When I get that, then I'm willing to go over to Nike and sign up for my 10% discount because I'm pretty sure I'm ready. And then I'm looking around with that discount and I'm like, oh, that's exactly the pair I wanted. And then I buy. So this is the, and again, I know in ministry, we don't call it a purchase process, but this is the commitment purchase process, whatever you want to call it. So if it is an informational intent keyword, and you should know that just by looking at the keyword, what is a non-denominational church? This person's not trying to marry the denomination. They're trying to figure out what it is. So if it's information, the information page, the strategy is it's an article, and that article should be trying to persuade that user to move to the transaction. Does that make sense? That's the next step. Okay, so that means you've got a lead magnet with a banner. And I'll show you this as the example over here. So if we go to ClickMail, and I'm just going to pull up whatever article.co/ whichever one comes up first here. And so the example of this is here we are in ClickMail. My drawings are still on the screen. Okay, what is a church vision statement? This gets like thousands of hits a month. And, oh, well, what is it? How do I craft one? What's it for? Why do we need it? Is it really important? Do we really need to use the vision statement? We're getting the information. It's like, oh, hey, these people seem like maybe they actually know something. This is pretty good. Take your calling to the next level, sign up for this back-end thing, and they can get their free account. And then they're reading, no, I don't need that. Okay, I want to just keep reading. Okay, cool. And we're reading. And then what happens? And then we continue to prompt and say, are you ready to go to the next step? And this isn't exactly targeted for this blog. What I could say if I wanted to target, we have like over 130 blogs, so I'm not going to target these to every blog. But if I wanted to get super targeted, it would say, learn how to craft the perfect church vision statement, access courses and community and live classes and all this stuff, and get my free account. And then they would come in and they would get the free course on how to strategize their vision statement, their church vision or something like that. And that would be perfectly targeted. This is broadly targeted to all 130 articles. And so either way, we're trying to convince a portion of the readers to move from information to transaction. And this is the strategy here. Do you have any questions about that first strategy, information to transaction strategy? Okay. So firstly, I'll say this to just build on this just a little bit. If they're off of your website, the goal is to get them on your website. So I'll add to this just a little, and we've talked about this. Platforms are not your friends. Platforms are a place to go to find people and then take them away from the platform. And that is primarily because if you have an authentic relationship with someone, you have their direct contact information. My mentor does not actively give his contact information out. And if I'm like, oh yeah, my mentor told me this and that and all this stuff, and it's like, oh man, I'm having a tough day. I need to ask someone a question I don't know how to answer, and I don't have his contact information. It's probably because it's not a real relationship. He talked to me that one time. He's like, all right, whatever, I'll see you later. And, it's like, but when he's like, hey, this old phone I have, that's the business phone now. I'm getting too many calls there. Here's my cell phone. Call me here. Okay. That's an actual relationship. And that's what happens on social media. They keep the names, the emails, and the phone numbers to themselves because they know that's valuable and they won't give it to you. So if your point of contact to quote, your audience is through social media primarily, they're not your audience. That's social media's audience. So I'm going to add one part to this strategy. is here. And let's say people are going to social media for the content, and that's the information. They're looking for information, or maybe they're not looking for information. And we'll just say this is going to be really ugly, B, and we'll call that browsing. They're just browsing and leisurely looking at things, and your information happens to catch their eye, even though they're not looking at it. The goal here is not to transact. It is to first get them to your website. So if the full information is on social media, whatever that is, we have the greatest family event carnival coming up. Sign up today. You don't let them sign up on social media, probably because they're not going to let you have that content, the name, email, and phone number anyway. You say, come over to our website and sign up. You can do that, and that is a very viable strategy. Or if it's like, hey, we release a new article on our site about, why you need to do XYZ, the preview of the article is what's enticing. And then when they click, it goes through to your website, which they should know, and then they access the content here. And then the website is to get them then to do the lead sign up, whatever that is, the free transaction with the lead magnet. Does that strategy make sense so far there, Pastor Karen? Cool. Michael, you doing all right, man? You got any questions? All right, cool. So then from the transaction, we want to then move them to commercial. And I want to get into what this means for ministries, because I know pastors, it's like, it's not about money. How does that map onto the church? Okay. We'll get into that a little bit. So let's go to the transaction. I'm going to leave my beautiful artwork. And we're going to go back to church near me. Okay. So if someone is looking up, what is a church? What is a Lutheran church? What is a Methodist church? Or best churches near me? And you have an article that's informational, and it's 5 best churches in, Little Rock, Arkansas, or whatever it is. And it's best non-denominational church, best Lutheran church, best Methodist church, best Pentecostal church, best Baptist church. And you've just got a list of the top 10 best churches, and they're all the best. And what are you doing? You're filtering all the people who aren't looking for you to awesome churches they are looking for. And all the people who are looking for you are going to click and move to a page where they do a transaction. So they got the information they needed, and then they're moving to engage with all the other churches, but the people who are looking for your kind of church are going to your church, and they're number one. Your church is number one on your list. So for example, if I go to, and I'm just picking random here, I go to a Baptist church and I make top 10 churches in Louisiana, Timbuktu, Louisiana, Baptist church is going to happen to be first on the list, because I want to make sure I get all the Baptists right off the top, click on my link and go into my transaction page. And then if they're still looking, well, I'm not Baptist, and they look through, great. We'll send them through to a ministry that's really good for them. And so that's how we can do information to transaction. Now, once we have them transacting, and we go to something like Church Near Me. So let's say they go to Top 10 Churches blog, and they click on top, Baptist church. And so they're on our transaction page. And let's just say that reroutes them over to our page, Baptist Church Near Me. What is that goal of that page of the transaction? The goal of the transaction is to get them to take action. So this is the flow of the sign-up process, the purchase process, basically. So now they're like, oh, yes, I do want the best Baptist church. And so now we've moved away from the information. We've moved to the transaction page. And after the transaction page, the goal then in the buyer journey or the churchgoer journey is to get the commitment, which in ministry is a tithe, essentially. That's usually the way you would measure that. And that's not to say that the money is the most valuable thing. Obviously, we're trying to, what do you want to say, do kingdom work. However, I can't measure results in the kingdom. That's something God does. I can only measure something I can measure. And usually that is, attendance. And so this is called your key performance indicator. And so this is something, I guess, that's really important. I'll put on here. Let me see, where is my annotation stuff? There we go. So the KPI, and this is when we were talking about our analytic data with that drain looking thing. This is the same thing. How many people are showing up to the information? How many of those people, what percentage rate is, that's a percent sign, trust me. What percent of those people are signing up and converting or doing a transaction, a free transaction? And then of those, how many show up and then take the call to action? That's the big orange thing at the bottom of our marketing funnel. That's the big action step. And so what percent of the transactors are then committing? And usually, again, that is commercial in nature. And the reason why I say that, even with a church, even though money is not the primary goal, you do have to have a certain amount of money coming in to keep the doors open. Because, whether or not we like it, and Pastor Karen, I'm saying this partly for you and also partly for anyone watching, I have to be careful about how I talk about these things. Even though money's not the primary intent, whether we like it or not, we have chosen an organizational structure for churches as opposed to a house church. If you have a house church and you're just having 10 people over to your house, you don't need to do any of this stuff. You just talk to people and they come to your house, and all this goes out the window. But if you have to pay a mortgage and you have to turn the lights on, there has to be a minimum amount of money coming in. And that is one way we have to measure it if we have an organizational structure. So the key performance indicator is then going to be something that probably has something to do with at least keeping the lights on. And if not that, then growing. And so that looks like, are we sustaining our weekly attendance or growing? And the way we would track that is, what is the rate of churn? So if I've got 100 families that come every week, and I know that the average churn, and what that word means is how many we lose on average over a year. So if I know the churn in my congregation is 10% per year, my marketing strategies have to at least produce 10% for us to continue to break even. So the KPI then would be minimum 10% growth per year, because when my churn is 10%, my growth has to be 10%, and then I'm even. So we're going to say 10% or more per year is the minimum functional marketing strategy. Okay, now that may even be a little bit different. Why? Because how much does it cost to pay someone to implement the advertising? Well, let's say we're going to, because a lot of churches don't have marketing or advertising in their budgets, at least maybe in the way they should. But let's say they have to bump the budget and say, okay, well, we're going to have to add 3% from our church budget into marketing. And so really what we need is, we actually need a 13% boost to cover not only the churn, but the cost of marketing, 13% plus. So we've got the marketing in there and we've got the churn in there, and then we're at zero. And that is how, so when we're talking about strategy, we have to have the right mindset on how to get fruit. Then we have to have a strategy looking into the future. This is what we're talking about. This is the strategy. In the future, I know we're going to have a 10% churn and a 3% cost of marketing. So we need to at least have a 13% growth per year in order to remain at zero. So the strategy first is to sustain over time, so you're not declining. And when you're not declining, you have bought the time necessary to figure out how to grow. And that is the mental model of inversion. Growth is really, really hard. Not failing is way easier. So how do we sustain and just not go bankrupt long enough to figure out how to grow? And not only that, building on the strategy there a little bit, a lot of times you don't even need to know how to grow. The fact that you are the only ministry that can sustain over time is what produces the growth. Because, for example, when you have some kind of pandemic, if you're the one church that can keep their doors open in your town, as soon as the doors open back up and people can go to church, everybody has to go to your church, simply because nobody else had enough money in the bank to make it a year with no services. They couldn't innovate quickly enough to get their stuff online to keep their congregation engaged. So they went belly up, and all you did was just not die. And this is, and I know that's crude. It's also unfortunately reality. And this is the Matthew principle. This is something that's very commonly discussed in macroeconomics, secular macroeconomics reference the Bible all the time because it is a truism, I think, in the world and in the kingdom, which is to those who have little, even what they have will be taken to them and given to those who have much. Why? Because those who have much can sustain and endure. And when let's just call it dollars, the dollars have to go somewhere. The value, whatever it is you're measuring, has to go somewhere. So if church one and church two each have some dollars, but church one can't sustain their ministry because their decision-making processes weren't functional, the dollars that were in that church have to go somewhere. Those people still want to go to church. And if church two is the only other option, all of that then goes over there. And the one who had little, even what they had was taken and given to the one who had much, or could at least sustain. So that is a very functional model. And so when we're looking at marketing, the first goal is to be sustainable. And so moving back to the commercial intent, yes, when we're looking at advertising and marketing here, the dollar amount is very important because we have to know if we're spending $3.65 a click for church near me, I have to know I can at least break even while paying for this. Otherwise, I'm not being a good steward of my ministry's finances. And what happens over time, I'm just chucking $3.65 into the trash can when nobody signs up because my marketing strategy doesn't work. And over time, I'm just running the church into the ground. So we have to look at the money to make sure we're at least sustainable over time, if not profitable. And addressing the profit issue is it about profit? No. What it is about is if you make and bring in more money than you spent, then you have more financial resources to go out and reach people for the kingdom, because that's the purpose. And so for that reason, I think ministries who are truly ministry minded, and it's not about the money, and I'm not talking about the televangelist who's just raking in cash because he loves money. I'm saying ministry leaders who are trying to reach people should have all the money they need to go and reach all the people. And what that means is you should make a profit on your advertising. God is blessing the ministry to go out and do more ministry. So functional, profitable advertising campaigns and marketing campaigns are exactly what you should use. And yeah, so we'll stop there with that. And we can get more into this. But the point that I want to pull out in this call is that the intent tells you the next step. If it's an informational intent keyword, you give them the information, you meet the need, and you call them to action on the transaction, the free conversion, the free sign up, the online service, whatever the next step is in that buyer journey. If it's a transactional intent they come into, the next step is to get that commitment to get the transaction and then to move them to the commercial. So in this case, in a church, they're like, okay, well, now I've already looked, I already know what a Baptist church is, and now I'm very interested. I want to sign up for that Best Baptist church near me. Save my seat. They save their seat. You follow up. Your team's calling them. Oh, hey, we're so glad that you signed up. We're excited to have you on Sunday. Is there any particular place you want to sit? Are you a front person, a middle, or a back? And it's like, all right, cool. We'll have some seats saved, and we'll see you on Sunday. Okay, cool. So then they show up on Sunday, and then the goal is to actually deliver the experience that the website promised so that they stay. And then what happens, and again, it's not about the money, but we have to have it in order to sustain. And then they tithe because they're there long enough and they feel that the church is adding value into their life. So they stay at your church and they're going to tithe 10% anyway. So the tithe goes into your ministry and then sustains the process. Do you have any questions about the flow and strategy and types of pages that we're going to create for these various keyword intents on your website and in your ministry? Pastor Karen, I know that's a lot. Please, anything you've got. And Michael, you as well. Anything you got?
I'm good.
Okay.
On my
Yeah.
end.
How you doing, Pastor Karen? What'd you say?
Yeah, I'm good too. I get the flow, so.
Okay, we get the flow. Awesome. That is and I would say that is a pretty advanced way of thinking. Most ministry leaders don't know what keywords are, So then we talk about the type of intent for the keyword and then the type of page and content we send someone to. That's a pretty advanced marketing process, and that's professional level marketing if you can execute that on a practical level. Now, have we gone over what to do with advertising and how to calculate cost per click and how to use that? Have we done that yet, Pastor Karen? I don't think we have.
I think we just touched on it, but we didn't get into any depth of it.
Okay. So I would like to try to get into some depth and see if we can't flush that out in the next 15 minutes. Now, we can review this if we need to, because I had to hear this 4 times at least when I was in training. Okay. But if I'm going to assess an advertising budget, and we know, I think at this point, maybe not, the cost per click is for ads that show up on, let's say, a search engine. Are you familiar with that? You got that? It's you pay per click when a potential client clicks, you pay for that. Okay, good. Sorry, you're way over here. I'm going to move you over here so I can see you. There we go. Okay. So then what we want to know is, how can I advertise to this sustainably, at least sustainably? So what we do is we take the $3, and you know what? We're just going to call it $4 even. 522, 365, 522, 3, so 448. We'll just call average cost per click $4. That's about an industry average, at least in the US. So we're going to say $4 per click. Okay. And then if you recall that analytic data where it's flowing down, and we're going to get a rate of conversion. Now, I am not going to advertise to this. The information, you can want to know how to build a deck all day long. I'm never going to advertise and try to take you to my deck building blog because you're not sure if you want to build a deck yet. But if you're looking to sign up and you're serious about Save My Seat, or you're looking to purchase, I'll advertise to you. And you'll notice cost per click is higher with these terms where people are ready to sign up. So, and you'll see it's directly correlated. Now, what I know is that there is a rate of conversion for those signups, and I think 3% is a good average. Most of the time when I do my math, I'll go to 2 or 1% to be conservative and make sure, because I don't want to miss it. I want to be on the low end, not the high end when calculating for ministry budget. So I'll usually go low, but let's say it's $4 a click, and to run some averages, I'm going to times that by 100 clicks. So now I've got some room for success. I'm not going to pay $4 for a click, get one transaction and one person to church. That'll never happen, but it's on the large averages here. So $4 times 100 clicks equals a marketing budget of $400. Okay. Now, when I spend $400, let's say I get an average of, let's say, 3 transactions. So 3 signups of Save My Seat, download my brochure, and people are giving me the contact information. So let's say I get 3 of those, and the church is following up with 3 people prior to Sunday and saying, hey, we're looking forward to see you Sunday. We'll save your seat. We got a parking space where, I don't know, whatever you do. And we're adding the value, pre-registering the kids, getting a commitment and saying, hey, are your kids going to be in the kid service? Yeah. Okay. What are their names? We'll add them to the list. Oh man, now they're expecting me. I have to go, or whatever it is. So we have 3 people, and let's just say the number of those leads that show up is 1. So what this means is the transaction to actual show up rate is 33%. Wow. I got to get a different mouse or something. All right. So 33% of the actual signups are going to show up at church. Okay. So this is the first part, and we know all this stuff. So we're going to spend $400 and 1 person's going to show up at church. Now, the question is that worth it? And now we have to do some additional math to figure out whether or not it's worth it. So the question then is, what is the lifetime value of a client? And I know those are businessy words. There aren't words for this in the church. We don't have words for this. I'm translating. So if I was going to say it in the Christian way, it would be, what is the financial income fruit from a congregant? What is the total income that someone's going to tithe over the tenure of their stay with your church, whatever you want to call it? So the first question we have to stay is, how long does someone stay at your church? Or actually, that's not correct. The first thing we would say is, what is the average tithe of the average, say, family per week? And so, or per month or whatever you have, we'll just say per month to make this faster, because if you have weekly data, you're going to have to multiply that by 4 for the month. But let's say the average family tithes, we'll just do easy math, and I don't know if this is reality at all, $100 per month. And how many months does the average family stay? Well, let's say they stay 10 months. I'm just going again for easy math. So the average family tithes $100 a month, and they stay 10 months. And so that equals $1,000 per family over the lifetime of their tenure with your church. So we know that the lifetime value, and again, this is the financial value, and this is not, you know, we're focused on kingdom fruit, and that's where our heart is, but also we've got to be able to keep the doors open. So the lifetime value of one church member is $1,000. I'm spending $400 to get one person to church. If one person coming to church then is on average going to bring in 1,000, I'm making a profit. So that's good, because again, our hearts with ministry, we can use that to go and reach more people for the kingdom. So that's awesome. Now the question is what is my return? Well, what I can then do is I can take this $1,000 and, or excuse me, $400 and divide it by 1,000, or $1,000 divided by 100. Either way, I believe 4.8. So the return, I'm doing this in my head because I honestly don't know how to do it on paper. 400 fits into 1,000 2.5 times. So this means that the return on investment for that advertising campaign, or what advertisers would call return on ad spend, the amount of spending you put into the ads, that is 2.5. Okay, so that's a 2.5 times return. We'll call it X, 2.5X. And then the question is this good? And that is a second question that we've really got to understand is, what is an acceptable return for the ministry? Because this is just the cost of advertising. There are obviously other costs involved in this. And so what this means is I put in $1 and the system we just put out spits out $2.5. So we have now just created, it's a miracle, the Lord has been with us, and we have a money tree. And the question is, does the effort I'm putting into growing this money tree produce enough results on the back end? Is 2.5 monies off the money tree worth the one I put into it? When I factor in, I have to care for it. I have the money tree is also funding this whole other organization over here. And that is 2.5 times enough to sustain the ministry. Now, 2.5 times in this case is actually about average for a professionally managed Google advertising account. So that's pretty good. So that's good. Now, when you're looking at good returns from investing in general, if we're talking about macroeconomics, 10%, which is 0.1 times return on investment, is a brilliant return on investment if we're talking about, let's just say, the US stock market. If you look at the S&P over 150 years, the average year returns a 10%. And that does not include inflation, if I understand correctly. So really, if it's, again, on average, now it's way higher, but on average, if you're looking at inflation of 2% per year, well, you're getting a 10% return minus 2% inflation. You're really looking at 0.08% return. So this is almost 25 times higher than a good year in the stock market. So you're immediately having an awesome result. You're over doubling your money. It's 250% return. So this is really good right off the bat. So this is the average return of a professionally managed Google Ads account. And that's across all industries. And I did not plan that. That just happened to be the case because we're using something like potentially real world numbers. Now, if we can't run a ministry on something around doubling and a halving our money, there's probably expenses in the ministry that are too high. We're not running a lean enough ministry to actually fund. And so what happens is when I work with ministries, we'll be getting like, for example, with Christian schools, a lot of times there's a very high profit margin. We'll be making a 10 times return or a 30 times return because these services are very expensive. And we'll say, well, I don't know, it's okay. We really wanted 50x. And then the question is, okay, why do we want a 50 times return? Like, based on what? Is that an industry standard? I don't know, because if that's the case, then great, let's figure out how to bump it to 50. But 50x is 500 times bigger than a good return in the stock market, and like 25 times bigger than the average return in a Google Ads account. So based on some basic measures of good investment and good fruit in investing, that's an absurd number. That if you got a 50x, it's a miracle. That's not, if I went to some very wealthy business people I know and I said, I can get you a 50 times return if you invest in this thing, they'd give me $10 million yesterday, because 50 is insane. So if there is a real reason that we ground in reality that a system should return 50x, good, then it should return 50x, and let's figure out how to do it. Unfortunately, a lot of ministry leaders, because we're not quite up on our business acumen and understanding how to assess a good return, we just say, well, I'd like it to be 50. And it's just a number that's floating because we want better than what happens. And then what happens is because we're not grounding that key performance indicator in reality, we'll actually go and we'll say, well, I don't know, it's not really working. And we'll just go and have someone else rebuild the whole thing. And that's the same thing we've talked about with websites. We don't actually know how to measure the fruit. And so we just dump the system. And I've actually had one Christian school who I've actually had to work with and show this math to them and help them to understand what return they're getting, because this is a real example. I'm like, you're welcome to do whatever you want. And also, you're getting an average of 30 times return on the money you put in. You're putting in $1 and this advertising campaign is giving you 30 back. And it's like, I don't care who you go to, you will never get this again. Like, do what you want, but also they cannot see because they don't know how to ground those numbers in reality. So what you have to do is you have to figure out, what does your church need to be sustainable? So when you say, okay, we put in $1 and I get $2.50 back, so 2.5 covers the 1. And so we've got $1.50 left over. Okay, so 1.5 is left over. And then the question is how much do I need to run the ministry if this is the primary driver of people coming to the church? And again, there's many avenues for the marketing, but if I need 1,500, let's call it $15,000 a month, how many dollars do I need to put in? Well, 2.5, 5,000 a month, something like that. Can I really put in $5,000 a month in advertising to make 15,000? That's about a 3x return. So it'd be like 7,500, something like that. And is this realistic? Can I actually scale up this advertising account to cover the bills? And if you can, it's like, okay, well, hold on. If we spent 7,500 a month and then we made 15,000 a month, because what's happening, more people are coming in. Can we sustain that many people? Because, how many people does that bring in? We can calculate the number of people. Do we have enough chairs for that? Would we need a bigger church? Or is the income per person too low? Because maybe we actually do need bigger margins. Maybe the mortgage isn't, maybe the mortgage and the electricity adds more than $1.50 per lead. You see what I'm saying? So we're paying $1 for the lead, and then we've got $1.50 left over. When you scale that up, that may not be enough to pay the bills. So now we have to look at the numbers and say, well, maybe we need to really push tithing and get this up to $150 a person per month, per family. And so then we can stretch these numbers and actually make it work. The other option, and this is probably the better option for most ministries, is your expenses are too high because we have too many unproductive ministries. And this is where we get into pruning. Look at those ministries, which ones are bringing in the people, and don't advertise for the ministries that aren't working. And not only that, start phasing the ones out that aren't bringing in the people. So we bring our costs down and we bring our income up. And now we have a sustainable ministry that at least can sustain over time, if not bring in, a profit from these advertising campaigns. Any questions on that approach to ministry sustainability and ministry growth with an advertising campaign based off of the keyword and the cost per click? Any questions on any of that? And again, I know that's a lot, so we can always come back to it or anything.
Yeah, no, it makes sense in principle. I think the challenge here is just convincing people that we need a marketing budget.
Sure.
So,
and that's not to say it has to be advertising. Again, you go where the need is, you go where the people are, and you invite them back. The question is just how do you do that most sustainably? And one of the ways that you can convince Pastor Karen, and this means you've got to be really good at this, is you show the numbers. Nobody, your opinion, maybe people can argue with that. What they cannot argue with is the numbers. And I do this, there's a lot of times when I'll work with pastors who are kind of in a tough position because they're regional pastors or, pastors of a location, but they've got sort of a leader of a bunch of locations over them that gives them a limited ability to do things. And so, it's like, well, we don't have the budget to do an online ministry, but that's actually the leading income provider for our church. And I heard that a couple times during COVID. Okay, well, what you need to do is you need to track this number, this number, this number, and then the amount of money that it's taking to produce that, and then show the profit of the campaign and the number of increased people, show those key performance indicators that the head pastor, whoever, is going to want to see. And then you present those and say, look, if I put in this much, I get this much. Can I have more to make this bigger? And if they say no, the decision-making ability is probably limited, because that is a very reasonable request. You're showing good fruit, and that should be expanded, and we should take resources away from low producing ministries and put them into higher producing ministries. I don't know how to say that any simpler. And so that is the approach that's going to work if it works. And if the people or the leaders are refusing to fund the fruitful ministry, that is the reason why the ministry broadly is unfruitful. And I have actually had that happen with ministries. I will say, look, the average client lifetime, the average churchgoer lifetime value, you said is, I don't know, $500 or whatever it is. And we're bringing them into the church and we can track it for $20 each. And let's scale this up. Let's fill up your church. All you've got to do is give me the advertising budget. Here are the numbers. This works. And then the response to that was, well, that looks really nice, but, we don't really have the bandwidth for that right now. And what that meant was we're doing so many events and we have so many ministries and our pastors are so exhausted. What he's saying is we can't do the follow-ups and the phone calls to the people that would come in. So he's saying we want growth and we're doing a lot of things for growth, but we're doing so many things for growth that aren't working. We don't have time for the thing that actually produces the growth. And that is a poor decision-making process. So instead of cutting things that aren't working and funding things that are, he's cutting the things that are working to fund the things that aren't working, but totally missed it. And so that's the way we have to look at this. It is about the fruit, not about what is effort or good intentioned or a good idea. It's just, does it produce? And then you get a growing ministry. So that is that's the training for today when we're factoring how to pay and run paid advertising campaigns or marketing. I mean, this really is the same math for a marketing campaign. It's just a little bit harder to measure because it's not as direct. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Well, good deal. Well, I'll see you next week, and we will continue with keywords and keyword research and how to do marketing next week.
I'm actually away for the next 2 weeks, just so you know. But then I'll be back. Holy Week, I guess, when I'm back. So
excellent. Okay.